press your button. Oh, there you go. Get connected. Hey, Kepa, how
What's
are
up?
you, my brother?
What's going on? All right, all right, all right. What's happening, fam? Peace, Sister Nikki. Peace, Brother Deshaun. Peace to Baba
There
Nu.
you go.
Give a big old fat hatep, Unc Ucha Sanel to the whole family. Life, strength, and health.
All
So,
right.
all right. So, what I wanted to talk about, I wanted to connect with what Baba Nu was saying about the concept of expansion, and he's made a few interesting points. In fact, quite a few. And I'm coming from the angle based on what I've been researching as well, because when I first came across Baba Nu, this was a time when I was dealing with the sustainable movement, with the green movement and everything, and I felt that I was being guided by the ancestors as well. And I'm one of those brothers who did not come into Kemet because I was seeking, I was looking for anything. In fact, Kemet came to me when I was a child. I saw a blue ankh in the hallway. The ancestors sent me that symbol when I was a child, and I began to follow that symbol. So it took me to the various religions like Christianity, Islam. My father was into all kind of stuff. He was, he's a Louisiana boy. His folks from Louisiana. He's a hoodoo man. Okay, so this caused me to have to look into various things, from Abrahamic faiths, Buddhism. I looked into a little New Agey philosophy, which you'll find all through Seattle in various forms as well. And I also went into African traditions that are still surviving, that have a initiatory system that's still intact.
Okay.
So what are the things that I feel like the ancestors have been guiding me to do? It was to look up the concept of, well, the technology that we would use to expand. Okay, and the brother had mentioned, Baba Nu had mentioned expansion. I'd also embrace the science and the teachers of Ifa, which is the West African tradition of the Yoruba people who come out of Nigeria. I've looked at other traditions as well, but the interesting thing about Ifa is that there was a constant talk about expansion among the elders. And one of my elders also taught me about the connection between that and the Memphite theology dealing with the Shabaka stone, that's also connecting to the concept of expansion, because our universe is constantly expanding. And we also learned that the universe is dealing with heat and expansion, and we are supposed to expand. So when the brother broke off about how the deities were saying that we were supposed to expand and pretty much conquer the earth, the way I looked at that is we're also supposed to have terraformed the earth, with greenery and with green technology of that era that was being shaken and harmonized with the flow of energies on this particular planet. So one of the things I really got into was, well, why is it that they talk about the sun so much, all this veneration of the sun? So I looked at it both literally, I looked at it symbolically, I listened to what all we have to say about melanin and everything else, but then I also started coming to my own conclusions. So we look at the word holy. It means to be whole, and to heal is to make whole. Pardon me, let me do something real quick.
Okay.
Okay, so in ancient Kemet, we learned that the Cometians not only revered Ra in the form of the sun, but it also had a hand in bringing life. It was all about life. What are the nicknames for Ra? One of Ra's names is Ankh Ucha Sadel, which is life, strength, and prosperity, or life, strength, and vitality. And it was on this land in ancient Kemet that Ra brought forth the Remesh, those who are the tears of Ra, because it's believing in each and every one of us, or the children of Kemet, were from Ra's teardrops. Maybe not in a literal sense, but we are crystallized rays of the sun ourselves. Okay? So each and every one of us are solar beings. We just have to tap into that. So we talk about conquering our planet, it was via planetary cultivation. The Cometians were to terraform the earth, along with bringing forth the technological advancement to balance out the technology on this particular planet. Because if you look at technology today, a lot of us have to literally get away from the cities because it absorbs all the negative ions and replace it with positive ions. So you're tired all the time, you're forgetful, and people are full of sickness and disease and so forth. And I believe that the ultimate goal was to bring forth an advanced civilization, which would allow us to cultivate not only our intelligence, but our spiritual powers by unlocking our spiritual faculties, and eventually would evolve into deities ourselves. But it was to take work on the cultivation of the human spirit. So we look at the symbol in ancient Kemet, the word for plow is also mer, which also means love. You spell mer backwards, mer, and you get rem, which is also the tears of Ra, or the tears. Because you see, it is with this cultivation, we shed tears for the work that we put in and for the things in which we love, and these things will grow. The same is could be said about the land of ancient Kemet. It was dealing with a very sophisticated idea of agriculture at that time. So when we look at the same thing can be understood when we're dealing with relations with groups, families, and nations of people. So the reason civilizations like Kemet were able to develop and sustain themselves is because the people cared about their land and those who lived on the land with them. Okay? They were supposed to take that care and expand. They were supposed to expand all over the planet. Unfortunately, certain things happened that caused us to stop. I don't know if anybody's familiar, but there's a book called the Collbran Bible. And this is material that's supposed to come out of Kemet, found its way into Persia and into Europe. And it says that the Cometians witnessed something fall out of the sky. And basically, after this object had fallen out of the sky, the plagues that it mentions in the Bible seems to be reflected in that particular manuscript. Now, this information is found. Yes, you got to find it. It's called the Collbran Bible. It's spelled Kolbrin. Okay? And then Bible. So it says that they saw something travel across the sky and basically fall out of the sky. And when it struck the planet, it brought forth these plagues. So we're seeing evidence that every so many thousands of years, our civilizations rise and then it falls and then they got to start back up again. So there's on a cycle in which humanity seems to be on a constant time limit that gives us so much time to evolve, and something comes and sets it back to zero. Okay, so we can see this in the teachings of not just Kemet, where they talk about ages and suggest that there's constant transformations. But we look at the teachings of India and they talk about the 4 yugas, and even in your solar book, the Holy Bible, it talks about the 4 horsemen, which are actually dealing with the 4 ages as well. And it's also talking about the 4th age, which would also be connected to the Iron Age, in which they call the Kali Yuga in the Hindu tradition. This is when they talk about the great death coming upon the world because there's a great purification. So when you get into the concept of even Buddhism, it talks about the samsara and us being on the wheels and the cycles of birth and death. So what happens with civilization, our civilization is also on the wheels of life, birth, and death. So we only have so much time to get it right, and then it gets wiped out, and then it develops again. And this has happened over and over and over again, according to the research in which I've come across. So we get back into what I see as our opportunity to evolve. When you look at the word evolve, it also contains the word love. The energy in the form of love and care expressed itself to the people as a spiritual force. So when love is cultivated and radiated from the hearts and minds of people, it sends out brain and heart waves that are picked up by the surrounding plants and animals. And because of this ability, as well as that of having an imagination and a spark of reason, humans have been tasked with the job of being caretakers of the earth. And we're being observed by forces more advanced than even ourselves, and they're testing us to see if we're going to act accordingly or if we're going to behave as a destructive force only. If so, then we will have shown these forces that we're not ready to venture out further into the cosmos and be co-creators in the greater universe. So does this mean that we're going to be devoid of wars? No. There's always the positive, there's always the negative. We look into even surviving traditions of Africa today. We have deities like Ogun, who actually fights wars. So no, it was not always about love, light, roasting marshmallows by the campfire, and everything was honky-dory. There was always some type of conflict, because you need a little bit of conflict in this particular plane, because it provides you the friction that gives you the leverage to rise above a situation. And this is why we have deities like Set. Set is a necessary netter. Okay. They always, to make the game in your card deck more more playable and interesting. There's a Joker in the deck. You know, to make your heroes in the comics more interesting, there's a villain. But there needs to be friction because it gives you the opportunity to grow and overcome situations. Because if you didn't have anything to push you forward, you would constantly stay in the situation that you're in, being comfortable, and you will not be evolved. And that's not the intentions of what this science is all about. It's about us evolving and growing. So when I look more into ancient Kemet, we also look at the view that our people have been cursed and all kind of stuff. And some of these curses that we're talking about are things that we have put on ourselves. It's time for us to take this idea of being cursed out of our minds and cultivate the innermost part of our spirit, because some of it is a misunderstanding of ancient scriptures and fear-based teachings that came from politics, in which Baba Nu mentioned, used as a business to control people and keep people enslaved. Okay, so we go back into dealing with what makes us whole. We have to deal with these things that makes us holy or solarized. We look at the foods these days and we see that there's all these chemicals and GMO products in the food. We have to basically get away from that, and we got to get back on the land. We need to start growing our own food and be the cultivators and the caretakers of the earth that we're here to be. Now, there are aspects of us that we need to evolve, and that's okay. We're here to evolve. We're here to do better and become better, right? So we get back to what they talk about black people and people that look like us, you know, the peoples and the indigenous people of the planet. We have much of these teachings of the power of the sun already in our genetic memory. But because of all these other things, racism and whatnot, our ancestors who had this level of realization are written out of history or so glossed over that you don't even know what they're talking about, or that these were even your ancestors half of the time. But it's described as being other than who they are, and sometimes flat out forgotten. So healing means to be made whole. We are here to be made whole through our healing. When we look at Osiris being cut into 14 pieces, he has to be remembered. And when you bring back your members, that's when you are made whole. Healing means to be made whole, and we are to be made whole. The whole would actually come together. We bring back these things which appear to be scattered into one thing. In Ifa, there's an Odu called Ofun Meji, and it talks about in the beginning, the calabash was shattered into shards. So eventually, all the pieces, the broken pieces of the calabash, are to be brought back into harmony. There's also another teaching in Ifa. There's an Odu that talks about man, that is male and female, would have to come back and forth from heaven to earth until we get it right. And we reach a state of which they call apere, which means perfection. It talks about this in the West African teachings that survive today. This is in one of the Odus, and forgive me for not being able to recall the Odu off my head from all the Ifa practitioners, but you'll recognize it when you hear it. It says that Olodumare had made a deal with humans that if humans can get it right, remove sickness, death, slander, gossip, the desire to have wars, and create a paradise on earth and reach a peri, then we will be able to leave this realm and go to other realms. So there's a whole universe out there. There's higher levels of consciousness that we are here to reach and explore. And when you look into Hermetica, in Hermetic teachings, it talks about how Atum was approached by the elementals who asked, are you going to create a mischievous being? And Atum says, I will create a being who will explore my creation and appreciate my creation. So we're here to also appreciate the creation and take care of it. If we can take care of this world and perfect ourselves to get better, then we'll be able to move on to better realms. Here's the case in point. If you study Kemetic wisdom, and if you look into the Oriki of Yoruba, you're going to notice something interesting. And that is, we seem to give homage to inanimate objects and things around us. Well, the secret talks about this, right? But they're half informed. You see, right now, I give thanks and praise to the spirit of my headsets. I give thanks and praise to the spirit of the computer and the spirit of the desk in which everything sits upon. I give thanks and praise to the spirit of the floor and the spirit of the ceiling and the spirit of the walls around me, because consciousness is all around us. And when you can appreciate the environment you're in, you will be allowed to explore other environments. But if you cannot appreciate the environment you're in, you're not going to be allowed to expand. We have not been taught to be appreciative of the things we have. We don't show appreciation, and this is also stopping our evolution. This is stopping our ability to cultivate our own spirit. And half the times we don't even wake up and say that I'm glad to be alive. We don't thank the ancestors or the creator enough, and wonder why we don't see anything happen in our lives, and wonder why we have all these family issues, and wonder why our children are walking around growing up angry at us, because we have not taught ourselves to appreciate anything, and therefore our children don't appreciate nothing. It's something that you have to teach is appreciation. You have to give thanks and praise. So when we pour out libation, we give thanks and praise to the ancestors. We give thanks and praise to the elemental spirits of the four directions and of the elements and all these other entities, as well as give thanks and praise. Sometimes they even talk about a rope doing a sacrifice to a vase. You know, now, of course, these are symbolic, but at the same time, there's also a literal aspect of understanding that inanimate objects has consciousness behind them as well, because it's consciousness that's holding all of this together. And to the African mind, everything is somehow connected to spirit. We do not separate spirit from ourselves. We're not separated from that. It's just in the West that they separated spirit from everything. And these Western religions, they talk about you have to be filled with something that you already have. The way I look at it is that you already are filled with a spirit. You just have to simply change the frequency in which your spirit is operating so that you can become the vessel of that higher frequency and let it radiate from the inside out. Now, I've been in Seattle. I was like one of the first brothers to be a Reiki master, right? So I learned about the love and light concept, and it works. Reiki does work, but there's different types of energy. And there's different types. Even the day has a specific energy over it. And Ifa, we talk about the Odu. This particular day has an Odu over it. This conversation that we're having right now has an Odu over it. Every second has an Odu over it. And when you get into Buddhism, it talks about over like 36,000 realms, being able to access these 36,000 realms within a minute time, in a minute's worth time, because we don't just live in one universe. There's a multiverse. There's multi aspects of creation and possibilities. And what happens is that when you do things like make sacrifice or you do certain rituals, what you're doing is that you're curving yourself from experiencing